Evaluations of the progress recorded in the implementation of the Millennium Development Goals (MDGs) in the past few years indicated that performance was mixed, with both success and failures within countries as well as among the different goals. Successes are largely associated with national leadership in mainstreaming MDGs into the national development planning process, adequate financial investments, and broad-based stakeholder participation. Another important lesson in MDG implementation was that the aggregation of data on progress masked a stark difference in realization of the goals among poor and marginalized population within countries and regions. These included women, children, the disabled, and migrants. It was also evident that the progress was least in areas in conflict or emerging from conflict, thus confirming the interlinkages between development and peace. Hello and welcome to Agenda 2030. And as usual, the program gives you an insight into the impact of the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, popularly known as the SDGs in Nigeria. I am Toyin Nkamiang John. Do stay with us. As part of the lessons learned in the implementation of the MDGs, it was also apparent that the non-participatory nature of the process of setting up the goals contributed immensely to the slow pace of acceptance and adoption of the framework by all stakeholders, especially during the first 5 years of the implementation, that is between the year 2000 and 2005. These lessons served as critical guidance in the formulation process of Agenda 2030 and its Sustainable Development Goals (SDGs). Hence, the guiding principles in the formulation of the new agenda were participation, inclusion, and transparency. Outreach and consultations with stakeholders using conventional means as well as innovative and modern communication technology characterize the formulation processes of the agenda. This afforded stakeholders the opportunity to feed into the discussions at global, regional, and national levels. This unprecedented global conversation also opened the door for citizens and stakeholders to have a say in the decision-making process around the implementation of the SDGs, including the monitoring and follow-up efforts. For this to happen, stakeholders at the national level need to be aware of the SDGs, as well as the steps being taken by their national and sub-national governments to domesticate and mainstream the goals into the national development plans. To further ensure that the voices of the people are adequately captured in the implementation of the SDGs, the United Nations developed the My World survey as an adequate platform for citizens-generated data and engagement with the SDGs at the global, national, and sub-national level. My World 2030 will allow people from around the world to tell the United Nations and member states what they are passionate about in the SDG agenda and create a measuring tool for perceived progress over the next 15 years. The project will collect globally comparable data and national adaptive data to report back on SDG progress, while also building dialogue between decision makers and citizens in order to contribute a people's perspective on how to implement the new agenda at different levels. Against this backdrop, we will in this episode be focusing on people's perspective for the implementation of the SDGs. With the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals gaining traction in Nigeria, the Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President on SDGs has given assurances of her commitment to continuously promote policies that will improve the economic and social well-being of the people. The Secretary of the Programs in the SDGs Office, Waziri Laminu, made this disclosure in a meeting with a delegation from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. The report.
Secretary of Program Alhaji Waziri Laminu, who represented the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, Princess Adejoke Orelope-Adefulire, briefing the task force team of the Total Official Support for Sustainable Development, hinted that as a prelude to a seamless implementation of the SDGs in Nigeria, the federal government has put in place a strong and robust tracking and reporting system mechanism. He said that the production of the MDG's 2015 Endpoint Report that chronicles the lessons learned from implementation of the MDGs and the National Voluntary Review document that reviewed the status and experiences so far on the implementation of the SDGs are all clear attestation to the efforts being made to attain the SDGs. He stressed that the fact that these documents were presented in 2015 and 2016 respectively and uploaded by the United Nations General Sessions is a clear indication that Nigeria is on track as far as implementation of the SDGs is concerned.
The government of Nigeria is committed to the implementation of the SDGs, and that we note in particular the fact that Nigeria remains dedicated to the decision taken at the Finance for Development Conference in Ethiopia, that is in Addis Ababa in 2015, which gave rise to this team. We also wish to indicate that the TOSD process is beneficial to Nigeria in terms of coordination and planning of the resource flow for the attainment of the sustainable development, and of course by extension the SDGs, and that Nigeria is not only a receiver of development cooperation, but we also give assistance to sister states in terms of development and cooperation.
In his remarks, the leader of the task force team, William Delalande, said the purpose of the visit is to conduct a pilot study to track the in and out flow of resources for sustainable development. This, he said, is for the purpose of accountability and proper management of development financing, as well as to determine whether the resources were used for the purposes they were meant to achieve.
So we need to show that what we're looking at, or what we used to look at in terms of flows, was not necessarily the full landscape. We need to measure. So we're going to try and estimate the TOSSD flows to Nigeria as part of this pilot study. And the third objective is more to try and support Nigeria also for future capacity strengthening activities.
The TOST is an emerging mechanism created to track the flow of resources used for the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. It is a component part of the activities of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD.
Since the establishment of Nigeria's homegrown school feeding program by President Muhammadu Buhari, the program has helped in boosting school enrollment, nutrition, job creations, and financial inclusion, amongst others. Highlights from the meeting of the Committee on the Implementation of the Out-of-School Program revealed that the federal government is designing a strategic framework to address inequalities and challenges that limit the poor and the vulnerable from accessing education. It is also believed that the success with the implementation of the policy will positively impact the SDGs by reducing the number of children who are out of school and increase the proportion of those who complete a circle-based education. Already, indications recently given by the Nigerian Minister of Education, Malam Adamu, showed that the number of out-of-school children in the country has dropped from 10.5 million to 8.6 million in the last 3 years. While the drop is ascribed to the efforts made by the federal government in implementing the enrollment drive policy and school feeding program, members of the Committee on Out-of-School Children program maintain that the government intends to sustain the momentum.
As I said before, in each state, they have their own peculiarity. For example, in the north, we are talking of undergraduate children. So many of them out of school. We have normally children. So many of them out of the school. Then you go to the south, we are talking west, we are talking of this area boys and area girls. You go to the east, you have boys out of school. These are the peculiarities in the different states we have. Now we have only 4 states as our pilots. What we're supposed to look into is in those 4 states, what are the people that we are targeting? Then in each this school, we have to know the target, that's the number of people that we want to intervene. And again, the type of intervention for each state, for us to avoid duplication of intervention, that we have to look into. Inside the report, there's to mention those intervention, high impact intervention that actually can affect these children, where we can focus our own.
To harmonize the various submissions and then come up with the consolidated proposal which will fit into the overall objective of addressing the challenges of out-of-school children in Nigeria.
Nigeria will continue to support the United Nations in all its efforts, including the attainment of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I thank you.
Agenda 2030, showing on this channel. Agenda 2030, leaving no one behind.
Next, we'll be bringing to you an interview with the United Nations SDGs Action Campaign Policy Specialist, Laura Hildebrandt, who spoke on the recent move by the United Nations to commission Nigerian hackers to develop an app for Global My Word Survey 2030. She spoke with my colleague, Desmond Utoye.
Okay, you're welcome to the interview session of the Agenda 2030 TV program. And with me today is, please just introduce yourself to us.
My name is Laura Hildebrandt. I'm with the United Nations SDG Action Campaign.
You'll be talking to us about the My Word Survey and the Hackathon Challenge in Nigeria. Could you just take us through all that is all about the Hackathon Challenge in Nigeria?
Sure, okay. So first maybe I explain what the My World Survey is and what that's all about. The My World Survey is a global survey by the United Nations and rolled out nationally by partners to understand what people think and what the priorities are about the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the Sustainable Development Goals, of course, are targeting all of the most critical aspects of our future, from environment to poverty reduction to inequality. And so it's important to us at the SDG Action Campaign that people remain part of this process. They were part of defining what the Sustainable Development Goals were, in fact, through the My World Survey. The My World Survey in 2015 reached out around the world to find out what people's priorities were. A very simple survey, literally asking people, what are your 16 areas, what are your 6 top priorities? And what we did in the UN was we captured all these voices, over nearly 10 million in total, and we fed that back to the government negotiations process to decide what the Sustainable Development Goals would be. What's interesting here is that a very large percentage of those votes, 30% roughly, 2.7 million votes came from Nigeria. And therefore, in a very direct way, Nigerian citizens helped to decide what the Sustainable Development Goals would be. Now, it's hard to understand just how unusual that is for the United Nations and for nation states to actually take people's voices so directly into consideration when they're trying to make a decision about development priorities. And we know from speaking to the people who were at the heart of that process that the My World Survey actually had a very direct impact. In particular, regarding the SDG 16, which is about good governance. This was not something that was originally considered part of the Sustainable Development Agenda, which had a lot of focus on poverty reduction and environment. But people kept saying again and again, a very high percentage of people said that a good government was critical to making that happen. And of course we agreed with them, but because that good governance scored so high within the My World Survey, it is quite clearly had an impact on making sure that that was indeed one of the goals that was adopted. And so that is the My World Survey. Now that the goals have been adopted, we think that it's very important to keep citizens involved in this process so that they can continue to add their voice to the implementation of the agenda and to let governments know how they're doing. And so My World 2030 survey does this. It asks people, are you aware of the Sustainable Development Goals? Which of the goals is of immediate concern to you and your family? And in the last year, has the situation on that goal improved or worsened? And so we really want to capture how people feel about how the government's doing, but also how their own situation is changing over time. And the plan is to have this survey now and to continue to running it all the way up to 2030 so that we can help governments and international leaders understand just how that citizen perception is changing over time. Now, what are we here for this week?
Yeah.
The last time we rolled out My World in between 2013 and 2015 in Nigeria, it was this huge national mobilization through the National Youth Service Corps. Like I said, we captured 2.7 million votes. You have to imagine the process that was, taking the survey to every single part of Nigeria and to rural communities. And so, of course, when we did that, the responses were mostly captured on paper. Mm-hmm. Now imagine, we have to take 2.7 million pieces of paper and feed them into a global database. Mm-hmm. And so those results had to be transcribed. We had to put into an Excel table.
That must have been cumbersome.
Yes, it took days of people sitting in a room looking at each individual vote and entering the information. Now, we think that we'd rather have people spend their time doing more important things like talking about the Sustainable Development Goals than sitting and transcribing the information. So what we're hoping to do here at the hackathon this week is to tap into the top developers here in Abuja and elsewhere to help solve that problem in a technological solution, probably an app of some kind that may scan the ballots and automatically read the data and put it back into the global database. So what we'd like to do really is to improve the way they're running the My World survey here in Nigeria. And I might emphasize as well, we're getting ready for this national rollout in Nigeria. So the app is targeting that moment in just a few weeks from now. But the app that we develop here with Nigerian technology will be rolled out globally. So we are looking for Nigeria to help improve our product and our process everywhere we do the My World survey in the world.
So whatever app is developed here in Nigeria will now solve the problem globally.
That is the plan.
That is big news for Nigeria.
Well, we think so, and we also think it's a good opportunity to link some of those young, aspiring Nigerian developers with some of the technology developers we're working with on a global level. When we then go and partner with private sector to roll out the My World survey, they'll see the results that have been developed here in Nigeria.
You made it a challenge that ₦1 million is up for grab for whoever comes out as a winner. Yeah, why do you have to make it a challenge, actually?
Well, we think that that's a great way to stimulate thinking. We will have 3 winners today. Today we hear from the hackers. We hear their pitches today at what solutions they've managed to come up with in the short time we've given them. But we know that to develop the solution to a point where we can use it, they'll need a little bit more time. And so we have 3 winners that will come out today, and then those 3 will actually compete for the top prize. Okay. And we think that to do that, they might be taking time out of their other work or their lives, and they need some financial incentive as well to cover that time. And our intention then is to work with that person or that team to over at least the next 6 months or longer to take the solution to the next level, to make sure that it's functioning properly, and to bring on 2nd and 3rd and 4th phases of it to make sure that it's the best that it can be.
So far, you're satisfied with what you have seen with the contestants?
We were very pleased with what we saw. We had yesterday morning, we had a full-on question and answer with them, where we made sure that they could understand in depth exactly what both the technology side of the challenge and the physical side of the challenge were, and the level. But you could tell by the level of questions that we were getting that the room was really filled with people who knew what they were talking about. Our digital strategy specialist was there; they could speak the same language, we were very confident that the people who were recruited through the government channels and also through the Civic Innovation Lab, who's hosting the hackathon, are really top notch.
Okay, in the build-up to the post-2015 agenda, that's the SDGs now, you were able to capture about 2.7 million Nigerians in the My World survey that was organized there. How many people are you targeting this time around?
So this time around, in this round, we're targeting 1 million. As I said, we're hoping that we'll continue to run the survey all the way to 2030. So if we can get 1 million now, that's a very strong signal to send back to the government of Nigeria on how they're doing on the SDGs. But it doesn't also stop at the national level. It's also important to say that those results will then be presented at the United Nations and internationally to set the bar for other countries to follow suit in terms of listening to their people. This is really quite extraordinary what Nigeria is planning to do here and to support the collection of up to 1 million voices this early on in the SDGs. It really takes, I think, some courage for a government to go out and ask for citizens to respond to that level. It's certainly not the case that all governments are doing this. That's what we're trying to encourage, but in some places, they're really not there yet. They're not prepared to let the people speak in such a public way about how they're doing. So that really congratulations to Nigeria on that level of civic engagement in this process.
Do you have a target date for both the rollout and maybe the completion of this very first phase?
So we're looking to kick it off with a political launch in the next couple of weeks around the start of March. And we think the full process for going out, training all of the National Youth Service Corps staff to go out and then train the full Corps to deliver the survey. And then they go and implement the survey nationally and come back with the results. The whole process should take around a month. So let's say we should have results around the middle of April.
Okay, so you are deploying the NYC student?
Yes.
How many of them are we looking at?
We're looking at around 1,500 of them. It's really extraordinary mobilization of youth. It's tremendous opportunity to inform them about the SDGs and then also for them to go and raise awareness about the SDGs and this opportunity to have a voice at the international level as well.
And you also intend to train them before they go out to the field for the main assignment?
Yes.
How long will the training be?
About 1 day.
Okay. At the end of the day, what do you expect Nigerians to actually take away from this very survey?
Well, two things.
Nigeria.
Two things really. One, first of all, is the basic awareness of the Sustainable Development Goals. We want everybody to know about the goals. That's the very first step towards government accountability. And then secondly, we do want them to know that their voice matters, that how they think the government's doing on the Sustainable Development Goals is important, and that this adds up to a very loud message from Nigerian citizens that will be heard around the world.
Yeah, that's the size of our interview today, and it's been well said that all Nigerians, you have to come out when the time comes to go and participate in this very survey. We expect that your voice will eventually be heard in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals in Nigeria, and possibly by extension globally. And we also want to say kudos to all the Nigerians that have participated in this hackathon challenge. To be glad to all see that the winners will be able to develop an app that will solve our problem globally.
Thanks for staying with us. As we move into the quiz segment, every week on this segment, we'll bring to our audience at home and respondents on the streets questions related to the SDGs. Selected winners from among the participants are already being contacted and will be invited to the Agenda 2030 studios for the live quiz segment, from where the overall winner and the runners-up will be entitled to our special prizes. And as usual, we will kick off the segment by first bringing to you views of the respondents on the streets.
I think job opportunity, with job opportunity we can acquire everything.
One is to focus more on good education.
I think what the government should be doing at the moment should be to provide us with good governance.
Job opportunities, and most importantly, good governance.
I think the priority should be education, should be given to education, because education solves a lot of things.
Job opportunity is is a major key, that is the paramount.
I would say health, education, roads, power supply, employment for the youth.
Education and health are very important to this nation because our youth really need it.
For me, I think the priority should be good governance first, because even though you improve all the other sectors, at the end of the day, you have people who are deciding on policies and all that, what works in all the other sectors. So for me, that's key.
Welcome back. Last week we asked, name the goal of the SDGs with the title Reduce Inequalities. For those who didn't know, Goal 10 has the title Reduced Inequalities. We have some winners and will be contacted at the end of this program on how to make it to the studio. For our question for the week, what is the primary aim of my word survey in the implementation of the SDGs? Send your answers to the number and email on your screen, and do endeavor to include your name and your phone numbers in your response. Remember, you can always watch this program and other episodes by subscribing to our YouTube channels on youtube.com/Fresh News TV and youtube.com/Agenda 2030 TV. You can also watch the program live on Facebook. Just log on to www.facebook.com/Fresh News NG and www.facebook.com/Agenda 2030 TV. Do follow us on all our social media platforms at Agenda 2030 TV on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Remember to drop your comments and share with your contacts. Do use the hashtag Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2030 TV. And that's our package. Thank you very much for being part of the program. I am Toyin Kamiang John. We'll see you again next week. Until then, bye.